So we are up to up to Ois Gimel, I believe, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to pick up the pace a little. Okay, so now Ois Gimel is where the Rebbe is going to discuss and address what the Frierdikke says in, thank you very much, in Ois Yud Gimel of the maamar, which is the Ois for this year. Omavar b'perek Yud Gimel hamasim l'shon hazu, which is fit, and so the Frierdikke Rebbe explains in Ois Yud Gimel of the original maamar Bossi L'Gani, which, remember, Ois Yud Gimel is technically in the third maamar because it was officially originally published as 4 separate booklets to be learned on 4 separate occasions. This third maamar was officially published for Purim, to be learnt on Purim. Ois Yud Gimel is the third of the 5 maamarim in the third booklet. So this is the one that's appropriate, or that matches up for this year. Shnas Yud Gimel Hamasheni. So in the previous Ois Yud Beis, the Frierdikke Rebbe talked about Lamai Lamai ad ein kates, and then in Yud Gimel he talks about Lamata Mata ad ein tachlis. What does that mean? Shegam Lamata Mata hu ba'ofen de ein tachlis. Not only is Elokus and Ein Sof infinite in general, but even in terms of how deeply it descends downwards into let's call it negativity loosely, there's no limit to how far down it descends. The same way that it's infinite in terms of the extent to which it spreads upwards, it's equally infinite in terms of the extent to which it spreads downwards. What does it mean, mata mata? What's downwards? Downwards means downwards into that which is less and less in touch with Elokus, where the Elokus is less and less begili, etc. Which happens, how does that happen? That happens through the many stages of Hishtalshalus. Hishtalshalus is this downward development of reductions in awareness of the full truth, etc. And as the awareness of the full truth and Elokus, etc. becomes reduced, the sense of self becomes increased, and then we go down and the olamas become more and more out of touch, let's say. And we go from Atzilus to Bria to Yetzirah to Asiya. So the way that this happens and this downward development occurs is through this Riboy Hamadregas B'Hishtalshalus, through these levels and stages of Hishtalshalus, of development, of as the light, the revelation gets reduced from level to level, until it gets all the way down to Olamas of Biyah. So first of all, there's everything pre-Tzimtzum, then there's Tzimtzum, then there's Keser and Atzilus, and then there's a Parsa that separates between Atzilus and Biyah, then it gets to Biyah. So Biyah is at the very tail end of, to us, we think of Hishtalshalus. Generally, when we talk about Hishtalshalus, we're talking about the 4 Olamas, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. And Biyah, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, I mean, Olam HaBriya is like, whoa, way up there. But if we to zoom out and look at the full picture from Hashem himself, just to get to Biyah, there's like a whole lot of journeying and reductions in awareness, just to get to the point that Biyah, the existence of the Olamas of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya is even feasible. Or befrat, so first of all, we have the descent all the way from Elokus, and then to get to Tzimtzum and Keser and Atzilus, etc., and the Parsa until you can get to Biyah. And then within Biyah, it continues this downward trajectory of reductions in awareness of the bigger picture and the full truth of Hashem, etc. As that downward trajectory continues, it gets to the point where not only are the layers of reality that are unaware of the full truth and of Hashem and Elokus and godliness, but it can get to the point where the awareness of the truth of godliness is reduced so far that they can actually exist creations whose nature actually is to oppose godliness, which doesn't really make sense if we're thinking about it objectively, coming from this angle from top down. Everything that exists only exists because Hashem's making it exist. And the only thing that's absolutely, objectively, inherently true, by definition, is Hashem. So how could something that exists because Hashem made it exist oppose Hashem or deny the truth of Hashem? It doesn't make sense, except for the fact that Hashem intentionally creates in a way that allows this to happen by reducing the awareness of himself, of Hashem, of godliness, etc., many times in this series of subsequent reductions, to the point that there are things that exist created by Hashem that are so unaware of the truth and where they come from that they actually oppose Hashem, deny Hashem's existence even. To the point that, so we have things that oppose Hashem, klippa v'sitra achra, things that are negativity, that we refer to as klippa, sitra achra. Sitra achra means the other side, the side that's not kedusha. V'ad l'klippas paroi, shemuveres parshasena b'parshas shelefoneha, she'amar li yari v'ani asisani. That the klippa of Paroi said, presented this supposed truth or view that the Nile River belonged to him and he created it. Which obviously is not the case. But, sorry?
What does Ye'ori mean?
Ye'ori. Ye'ori means the river. Li Ye'ori, my river. Paroi, and the Nile is his river. Li Ye'ori, this my river belongs to me and I made it. In other words, denying the fact that Hashem is the creator and presenting himself as the creator. V'yesh lahoisif, and we can add on top of this, shekein gam b'hanhagas ha'adam. This same idea exists in our behavior, conceptually. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but for all of us, there are behaviors that are conceptually equivalent, just to a lower degree of magnitude, to what Paroi said. Right? The beginning of the descent, how do we start to go off track? It's when we said shita, the shorish of shtus, the real shorish comes from the word netiya hatoya, which means to turn away. Netiya kachuta sarabavad. It's the moment we turn away from the path of truth, the path of living life and thinking and managing ourselves and our lives the way that Torah says, and viewing things in the way that's true as presented to us and explained in Torah. The moment we veer away from that, we're already off the path. We've turned away, and it's already at that point, it's not accurate, it's not correct. It's false. But even from this subtle, minor deviation from the truth, today people talk about things being my truth. It's my truth, it's your truth. There is such a thing as a experience of being valid, right? Because experiences are valid, experiences are subjective by definition, and someone's description of their experience can be true, but there's no such thing as my truth or your truth or anyone's truth. There is the truth, and it's either the truth or it's not. So the moment it's not the truth, it's not the truth. It either is the truth or it's not. Even if the extent to which it deviates from the truth is minor, it's still not the truth. And from that which begins with a minor deviation, yored lamata yoser, there's a tendency, once we're off the beaten path, off the path of truth, once we leave the path, that it tends naturally to grow, the deviation grows until what started out as just being a minor deviation from the truth ends up in a person whose life revolves around things that give them sensory pleasure. In other words, right now their priorities are completely not focused on the truth at all. Their priorities are focused on that which makes them feel good in the moment, which has no correlation with the truth at all.
Why?
Why?
Why aren't our taivas in line with truth? What makes them not truthful?
Taivas may not necessarily be problematic per se, but if our priorities are, and the things that manage our perspective and worldview and priorities and decisions are what's going to make us feel good, then our worldview is not in line with what's true, right? The way that we see things, our priorities are not determined by the truth. They're determined by what feels good. Now, some of the things that feel good are perfectly kosher. It's not saying that doing things that feel good are necessarily evil or bad, but the fact that we're doing it because it feels good means that our priorities and our decisions are not being, what's the word? They're not based on the truth. They're based on what feels good. Now, again, that might be neutral. Things that feel good, a lot of things that feel good are neutral. But the bottom line is, it's not being driven by the truth. It's being driven by something that's not the truth. Does that answer your question? Somewhat.
Yeah, I think the question's more probably, so then what would it look like to be living with from a level of truth on a day-to-day basis?
What that would look like is a good question, and an important one, because ultimately that's what it all boils down to, right? It's tachlis. So what that would look like?
We say that, but all of like the deepest part of us is tainug. Like we say everyone does. I mean, that is human nature to do.
There's a tainug of the nefesh elokis and tainug of the nefesh abahamis.
Okay, so then what would tainug of the nefesh elokis look like?
It would look like being motivated by that which is true because it's true. Being motivated by what Hashem says and what Hashem wants because Hashem says it and Hashem wants it. Now, even if someone, let's say hypothetically, someone just is very academically oriented and their favorite academic pursuit is Torah. They just love learning Torah. And they love doing mitzvahs, hypothetically, lucky person, right? Now, that person could be technically learning Torah and doing mitzvahs all day, but if their motivation for doing that is the fact that it feels good, in terms of the extent to which their priorities and decisions are based on what is true and because it's true, it's not being determined by that any more than someone who sits on the couch and eats ice cream all day. Both people are doing the thing that feels good to them, right? So it's not necessarily per se what the person's doing.
But one of them is like accomplishing something.
100%. But the fact that the person's doing it because they feel like it, what happens if that person wakes up tomorrow and all of a sudden what they want to learn about is not Torah anymore? They're in the mood of learning about Avodah Zarah, or they're in the mood of doing who knows what instead of mitzvahs. Well, until now they did what they felt like, and maybe they'll continue to do what they feel like. It just so happens that yes, at the end of the day, Hamaisu or Ikar, and they're learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, which is very valuable. But ultimately, the decisions and priorities do not revolve around the truth. So now in reality, there are very few, if any, people who, if their lives and priorities and choices are determined by what they feel like, the number of people who, if they're doing that, are going to be learning Torah and doing mitzvahs all day is, let's just say, not a huge number. But the bottom line is, even if what the person is doing is neutral and they're eating kosher food and doing fun things that don't hurt anybody and there's no averus involved, the bottom line is their worldview and their priorities are not based on the truth. They're not based on what is correct. And the moment we're doing something for any reason other than because it's correct and it's the truth, it's basically at that point it's just a question of magnitude and what we happen to be in the mood of, more or less. Now, obviously, that's an oversimplification. There's a big difference between a person who, enjoys learning for a little bit each day and enjoys doing some mitzvahs and helping some people, and also enjoys doing some things that are neutral and kosher, and does all of those things because they want to, versus someone who's doing, who knows what. There's a big difference. But ultimately, if both people are doing what they're doing because it's what feels good to them and what they want to do, in a sense, they're kind of almost doing the same thing. They're both doing what they feel like doing. They're just, one person happens to feel like doing better things. Which is why it says here that it starts with a deviation from the truth, right? So now back to the flip side. What does it look like when someone's living their life according to the truth? What that looks like is wake up in the morning and we ask ourselves, what should I be doing and why should I be doing it? When a question comes up and we have to consider what's the answer, we ask ourselves, okay, so if I want to know what the answer is, the question is very simple. What does Torah say about this topic? Because Torah is Hashem's wisdom, Hashem's knowledge. Torah is the means by which Hashem gave us access to His mind, so to speak. And so if we want to know what the answer to a question is, what should be our perspective, what should be our worldview, whatever it is, what's the answer to the question? Very simple. What does Torah say? Because Torah is the truth. What does Torah say I should be doing right now? Because Torah is the truth, and whatever Torah says I should be doing, that's what I should be doing. Right? In the moment there's any motivation other than this is what Torah says, this is the truth, this is what Hashem wants, it's just a matter of degrees.
My brother said it's like Hanukkah, like the Yavana.
Yes. Very good. Very well said. So it starts with, generally speaking, right, a person who, their life is more or less on point and the way it should be. Let's say a person who is hypothetically pretty much driven and motivated by the truth, and then they're like, you know what? Just for today, or, I need a break, or whatever, like, that's all good. I'm going to just do something because of any reason other than it's the truth and it's correct. Chances are that person is not going to dive straight into the deep end. What are they going to do? Something a little bit that's not exactly driven by or motivated by the truth, and it starts with a minor deviation that will tend naturally to escalate to being... Now, he doesn't just say to being involved in taivas. He said, mushka b'taivas. Mushka means sunken in, shakua, to be immersed in taivas. So this is a person, at this point we say mushka b'taivas, it's someone who all they think about all the time is just what's going to be the best source of sensory pleasure right now? What's going to make me feel good right now? That's the thing that they're motivated by. And it could be taivas heter. They're not looking to do anything against halacha, but what's they're going to be the greatest kosher source of sensory pleasure for me right now? That's the next step. And it's, a pretty big step. But that will tend to escalate further, because the fact is, once our motivation gets hijacked by what feels good rather than what's the truth, it's just a matter of degrees before, what feels good and is kosher. It's a matter of time before what feels good and is kosher is no longer giving a sufficient increase in dopamine to be exciting, and then it will tend to escalate and go up another level, until it gets to the point where, because a person has allowed their priorities to be hijacked by what feels good, the next step in what continues to feel better will become things that are not allowed, things that are against halacha, chas v'shalom. Within this category itself, there are levels. Right? At first, what happens is the person is looking for a greater source of sensory pleasure, and all the kosher things are no longer sufficient source of dopamine to be exciting. So they go to things that are not kosher. Why are they doing it? Because it feels good. L'te'avon means for appetite. They're doing things that are asur. There's what's called in halacha mum l'te'avon, someone who goes against halacha because it feels good. And most of the time, the vast majority of Averis, I think it's fair to say, ala te'oven, because it feels good, it's convenient, it's comfortable, it tastes nice, whatever it is.
Sometimes it's like the opposite. It's like you're lazy, so you don't do it.
Same thing. It's just that. See
That's
the.
also an
In,
appetite.
Different type of appetite.
Yeah, but the bottom line is it's because it feels good. When a person's lazy, or it doesn't ultimately make you feel good on the other side, but the bottom line is when a person's feeling lazy, they're behaving in a way that's lazy because that's what they want, right? That's what feels comfortable and familiar to them right now. Something along those lines at least. But that's how it starts out. And then what happens once, that stops being exciting, and then, it's not uncommon that what happens is that will tend, the pursuit of pleasure only can continue so far, and then what happens eventually, it's not uncommon. And again, this is a long pathway that doesn't happen overnight, but eventually what is, likely to happen is that eventually takes a person to where they start to build up resentment, and then they will start to do averis lahachis, just to spite. Ooh, what am I not allowed to do? Find another averis, something I can do, just in Yiddish to say avtzalachas, which avtzalachas is avtzalahachis, which is lahachis, to make angry. So that's first of all, right? So there's this idea of within our behavior, within the behavior of a person, there is this whole range of behaviors that are negative, that are not the truth, that are opposing the truth, starting from the very subtle, which is a minor deviation from the truth, but ultimately it's motivated by something other than the truth. It's not the truth. All the way down to the bottom of the valley, the bottom of this journey of descent, which is doing things to spite Hashem. So at the end of the day, it's interesting kind of working backwards, right? A lot of times what we say is, the way we look at things is that it's kind of reverse engineering something and doing the whole thing in reverse. Because naturally, when people are learning about Ruchnius, what do you say? Well, here's the way things are in Gashmius, and it's also like that in Ruchnius, right? And then we have the things like the Shalar Kodesh says, it says in a number of different places that really it's the reverse. Torah medaberes b'elyonim v'remezes l'tachtonim. What Torah is actually talking about is the Ruchnius. The Ruchnius comes first in the Gashmius. What we know and relate to is a product of the Ruchnius. So really it starts up there and it descends down here. What the Rebbe seems to be saying here is in a sense the reverse. Not that it starts here and it ends up there practically, but what's Hashem's priority? Hashem's priority is here. Hashem cares about here. In order to have this, in order to have a physical world in which we can live and grow and overcome challenges, etc., there has to be the Hishtalshelus to get here. So there's a Hishtalshelus. So even though the structure and design of the physical layer of reality resembles the non-physical layers of reality because that's where it comes from, in truth, it's actually the reverse. Hashem designed those non-physical previous layers of reality this way so that the product, the physical layer of reality, should be this way because this is the way he wanted it to be. So yes, this layer of reality is the way it is because it's a product of the spiritual layers of reality and that's the way they are, so therefore this one is the way it is. But the reason that Hashem made those non-physical layers of reality be the way that they are is because he wanted them to result in this one being the way it is. So because Hashem wanted, for whatever reason, and interestingly, the Rebbe doesn't get into this at all in this maamar, Hashem wanted us to have this idea of challenge and klippos and growth and achievement, etc., in the face of all of these things that we've talked about. So Hashem designed the structure of reality through all the various layers of reality to be this way, so it should end up this way down here. So therefore, this idea also exists within Seder Hishtalshelus, shenosef al olamas dikdusha, that not only are there layers of reality that are of kedusha, holiness, that they are in touch with and aware of the truth of godliness of Hashem, and the godliness is revealed in them. But there are also, there is also within Hishtalshelus, there is also a descent into layers of reality that have a sense of self, which by definition is technically opposed to the full truth, which is that nothing exists other than Hashem. V'zeh gufa yesh lem kama dargas. Tchila klipas noiga v'achar kach gam gimel klipas shelamata mimeno. So within these layers, pre-physical, non-physical, even before we get to Olam Hazeh, there are already, I don't know if you'd say layers of reality, but structural components of layers of reality that are negative and opposed to Hashem, which are the Klippa and Sitra Achra. Right, and first it starts with Klippas Noiga, which is like we talked about the Taivas Heter, it's neutral, but the bottom line is it's not the Emes, it's not Kedusha. It's not actually neutral, it's a mixture of good and bad, but it's net neutral. The bad and the good are more or less equal so that it's net neutral. But then it goes down further. There are the further three shells, klippos, which are beneath that, and they're not net neutral at all, they're net negative. And within these there are a number of levels. Until you get to the point of Parai, who actually claimed to be divine, to be a creator, to be a god, Rahman al-Islam. So this is...
Connect to what's talking about Parakid Gimel. This is what Parakid
This
Gimel
is, yes, this is more or less Parakid Gimel.
Wasn't it, didn't we discuss that Parakid Gimel was talking about the Shekhinah coming all the way down?
Yes, all the way down within all these levels of negativity, and then we're elaborating on this idea of the negativity. So we say that it's Ein Sof is Lamato Mato Adin Tachlis. This is, and I'm glad you asked that, so we can come back and tie it all in and clarify that. What the Frierdikke Rebbe is doing in this Ois Yud Gimel is really elaborating in detail on what is this Mata Mata, in which the Ein Sof comes down Adin Tachlis.
So low where a person could feel like they're God.
Correct, exactly. Omnam. Binyan zet tzarich lo havin. So now the Rebbe says we've got to have a conversation about this. Ma'u ha'tam shebabir inyan de mata mata adin tachlis matzino arichos habir o prote protim. Va'ad shematzino be'etz chaim karv l'siyom shnei sha'arim hamavarim prote adargas l'mata mata. Ad l'darga tachtoni shenikras b'shem klipos u'b'zeh gufa ad l'klipa achi tachtona. Why would Hashem, Torah, want to get into the nitty-gritty and details at such high resolution and in so much detail into the technicalities of klippa and negativity? We need to understand that negativity exists, okay, but why do we need to get so deeply immersed in the details and the nitty-gritty of it? So first of all, we have it here, the Frierdikke Rebbe. Then before that, in Eitz Chaim, and even earlier in Zohar, Matzin become Ubefrat Pashas Pekudei Arachas Gedola become a Pratim Odes Ha'ein Tachlis Sheb Mata Mata. What's this? First of all, fascination, and second of all, this interest and or desire to get so deeply immersed in not just the concept of negativity and the way it works, but all the way down into the nitty-gritty at high resolution of the lowest of the lowest of the low of the negative and the Avodah Zarah and Para and all the way down. Why do we want to go there? Why do we want to go so deeply into that which is the opposite of Elokus and the opposite of Emes?
What does it mean, why do we want to go so deeply? What's the question?
We see here the Frierdikke Rebbe is elaborating and really getting into the mata mata adin tachas and explaining the negativity and breaking it down and all the layers of negativity in our behavior until lahachis and all the way down to pari and avodah zarah and shalosh klipas atameas and the worst of shalosh klipas atameas. It almost seems like the Frierdikke Rebbe is taking pleasure in elaborating on negativity. Right? We have to understand that it exists, understand how it works, but generally as a rule in Torah we try to focus on the positive, try to be immersed in the positive. Why this prioritizing of getting so deeply immersed in the fine details of negativity, of Hepach HaKdusha, of Avodah Zarah? So the Frierdikke Rebbe here seems to be very interested in getting into the details. And we have it back in Eitz Chaim, all the way back into Zohar. We see these places in which it gets into negativity. And since when is that something that we want to get so deeply immersed in?
So until now, it was the Rebbe quoting the Frierdikke Rebbe, now the Rebbe is asking a question?
Exactly, yes. So Ois Gimel here is sort of a quick recap of Ois Yud Gimel of the Frierdikke Rebbe's maamar. And now the Rebbe is asking, why this fascination and interest in getting into so deeply into the negativity? Okay, there's a lot of layers of negativity and it comes all the way down. No. We have to break it down and get into the minutiae of how evil and how bad it can be and how bad it can be in our behavior and how bad it gets in Klippos and in Avodah Zarah and Para. Whoa. Is that really necessary? Obviously it is. The question is why. So the Rebbe says, first of all, we're going to do this in a number of stages. We're going to have one answer which could already be enough, and then we're going to build layers on top of that. So, we could say an answer for this to Kivin Shestakel Baraisa Bara Alma, right? We know that it says in a number of midrashim, as well as a number of places in Kabbalah, there are many similar variations of this idea that Hashem looked in the Torah and created the world. Now, Lachin, therefore, Bichtei Sheyuchal Lias His Havos Kol Prate Hadargas Dulu Umazeh Kefi Sha'al B'Tzonis Baruch Mitzad Tam HaKamos. Because of this Tam Kamus, this hidden reason, for some inexplicable reason, Hashem had a desire that there would be in existence negativity, Lu'umazeh, falsehood, that which opposes Hashem, all the way down to these, very deep levels of denial and opposition of Hashem. For whatever reason, Hashem wanted that to exist. And if Istaka Baraisa Bara Alma, everything that exists was first in Torah, and then from being in Torah, Hashem brought it into existence. So if Hashem wanted to have all of these components and details of negativity, they needed to be in Torah in order to be able to be extracted from Torah and to be created. Right? If you were to look at a blueprint or a plan of a house or whatever it is, any plan of anything, and you look at the plan and you ask, well, why would you get into all the details of that? Seriously, who cares about the details? It's the project is supposed to include those details. If the project's going to include the details, they need to be in the plan, because if they're not in the plan, they're not going to be in the details. If Torah is the blueprint from which Hashem created the world, and Hashem wanted creation to include all of this negativity, then it has to be in Torah, because that's the blueprint, that's the plan from which it's constructed.
Isn't the question on why Frierdikke Rebbe is getting into it?
Yes. Why is the Frierdikke Rebbe as part of Torah getting into it? And so the Frierdikke Rebbe is not the first one, and the Rebbe says, and why the Frierdikke Rebbe as, let's say, one of the co-authors of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And if that Frierdikke Rebbe is getting into it, obviously that's the Kavanah, and it's supposed to be part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And he's not the first one. We have it in the Rebbe, lists in Eitz Chaim and Zohar. The Frierdikke Rebbe is not the first one. So, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai clearly saw the necessity for this detailed description of all the, the extent of negativity with all the details and minutiae in very high resolution to be discussed clearly in Torah Sheba'al Peh, and then in Eitz Chaim again, and then here the Frierdikke Rebbe again. These are all participants in the co-authoring of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Clearly it's supposed to be part of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Why? So the answer is, Torah Sheba'al Peh is part of Torah, Stakel Baraisa Bara Alma. So, because Hashem wants all of these details of Klippos to exist for whatever reason, they need to be in Torah in order to be able to be brought into existence. Omnam Inyan Zeh Gufa, the Rebbe says, but this itself, his Havas Metzias HaKlippos Al Yedei Zeh Shekush Baruch Hu Stakel Baraisa, why did Hashem bring all of this negativity into being? So the Rebbe doesn't get into it philosophically, which, Chassidus does talk about in a number of different places and, has a sort of a number of takes and angles on the philosophical component of why Hashem wanted Klippa to exist. But just very generally speaking, Hu bichtei shetushlam tachlis hakavona. For Klippa to exist, it's in order that the objective should be fulfilled. Hashem has an objective that He wants to have fulfilled. Everything that Hashem creates, He creates in order to contribute towards that objective. Kamam Razal, as Chazal say in Pirkei Avos, Kol ma shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu b'olam lo bara el echvodi. Everything Hashem created, He created for His honor, aka He created in order that it should contribute to the realization of, or the fulfillment of Hashem's desire and objective. So Hashem created Klippa because the existence of Klippa contributes towards that. Or as the Baal Shem Tov says, right? We have in Tehillim, Sur Merava Asei Tov, it says, turn away from bad, don't get involved in or be subjected to bad. Va'asei Tov, and do good. So what does the Baal Shem Tov say? The Baal Shem Tov is reinterpreting, and the truth is it's not really it's a technically very valid translation also of the words. Va'asei Tov yasem meira tov. Sur meira, stay away from the bad in terms of being subject to it and caught up in it and persuaded by it. Va'asei tov, and make it into good. Not only should you not allow it to control you, you should control it and turn it into good. V'hainu, shemashakasav sur merahu rak hascholas havoda. Right? The way that we traditionally look in this pasuk is there are two separate things. They're parallel, equivalent, whatever it is. Sur merah, don't do bad, don't transgress prohibitions, don't do anything prohibited. Va'asei tov, and fulfill obligations, do the mitzvahs, say the things that we're supposed to do positive things. Here, the Baal Shem Tov is saying, no, it's all one thing. 2 steps. Sur merah, number 1 is, make sure that you are safe and secure in the face of the negativity and that you are not subjected to it. Then stage number 2, aval shleimus havoda, that's the hascholas avoda, the beginning. What's the completion of our avoda, of our work with the negativity? Stage 1 is be negativity proof. Stage number 2 is lo rak sur merah, not only to make sure that we are not subjected to or influenced by the negativity, elo gam asei merah tov, we should take it and make it into positive. Convert it to positive. This is this idea that we see all over the place in Chassidus of converting darkness into light and bitterness into sweet. And the halachic variation of this idea is Zdonos nasalo kazachis. Through Tshuva Me'ava, the Gemara says that Zdonos, Averis, things that someone did wrong, even intentionally, nasalo kazachios, not only is tshuva able to neutralize them and get a clean slate, but it can nasalo zachios, it can actually convert those negative things into be things that are actually positive, not just not negative. We have stories in the Gemara, etc., talking about people taking a given behavior and converting the same behavior from negative into positive. And this is what we're all here to do, to take the negativity and turn the negativity into positivity. Right? And this is the whole idea of taking shtus, dulamazen, turning it into shtus to kedusha, atzei shittim, taking the sheker and making it into keresh, taking falsehood, converting it into positivity, so it can be the beings that the Mishkan's constructed from. Or komoven gam emashem mevi Admor Zakim B'Sefer Tanya Kedusha Tzarech Lasses Leis Baruch Dir B'Tach Tonim, as the Alter Rebbe talks about in Tanya, that we need to make this world into a dwelling place for Hashem. Hashem wants to have a dwelling place in Tachtonim. And what does the Alter Rebbe say? Not just Tachton, not just Tachtonim, but Tachton Shein Tachton L'mata, into the lowest of the low, which is the maximum extent of Dir B'Tachtonim. The greater the extent to which it's in Tachtonim, the greater the extent to which the concept of Dir B'Tachtonim is fulfilled. So the whole point of existence is to have a dir b'tachtonim. The more tachton something is, the greater the extent to which dir b'tachtonim can be realized and fulfilled. So the mata mata arin tachlis, the deeper we get into this idea of mata and tachton, the greater the extent to which the concept of dir b'tachtonim can be realized and fulfilled. Shegam boi tzarich lifal inyan arida. That yes, we do kedusha and elokus ein sof should be brought down all the way down lamata arein tachlis. That's the whole point of dir b'tachtonim. And how? How do we achieve that? We are the foot soldiers who make the dir b'tachtonim, who take the negativity and turn it into positivity. Take the sheker and turn it into keresh. Which means then, interestingly, and this is what the Rebbe is going to address next, that we're going to have to figure out, because this seems to not be so simple to understand. If the ultimate realization and fulfillment of the concept of dira b'tachtonim is when the dira is in the tachton she'ein tachton lamata mimeno, in the lowest of the lowest of the low, and we are the ones who are here to make that reality, to make the dir b'tachtonim a reality, that means that it's our job to bring elokus into the tachton she'ein tachton lamata mimeno, into the bottom of shalosh klipsa tameas and the parei and the avodah zarah and all of etc. And the Rebbe says, but hang on a second, this doesn't seem to be understood at face value. We all say every morning in Birchas HaShachar, Hashem, please don't put me in a situation that's going to be challenging. Don't put me in a situation in which I'm going to be at risk of doing the wrong thing. Sorry?
Yes, paradox.
Right. And this is something that Hashem is on board with. And Hashem, will often say, you know what? Request received and granted. Yes, I don't want you to have problems either. So yes, we'll keep you away from there. So on one hand, we are supposed to say, Hashem, please don't subject me to challenges. Don't put me in situations that I'm going to be at risk of doing the wrong thing. And Hashem likes that idea very much. And Hashem is, partial to granting that request and saying, you know what? Yeah, I'll give you a hand. I'll keep you away from that. And then Hashem says, you know what, guys? I want dir b'tachtonim. Tachton she'ein tachton lamata mimeno. You got to go out and make this happen. It's like, well, how does that work? So Hashem's telling us to work in an environment that's going to be the highest possible risk, but at the same time, we're not supposed to want to do that, and we're supposed to ask Hashem to protect us from risk. So which one is it? Are we supposed to be engaging in these, in the pursuit of making a dir b'tachtonim in the maximum risk environments, or are we not? And it seems like they're both true, which doesn't seem to work.
Well,
so
even without trying, I don't know, like the lowest of low, but we're gonna encounter pretty low.
That's good, that's true, and the bottom line is when something shows up on our plate, it's our job to make the most of it. But what we're saying here is, why do we get in such detail? In the Frierdikke Rebbe does it, in the Zohar, and the Eitz Chaim again. Why? Because this is important. Hashem wants a dira in the she'ein tachton lamata mimeno.
How do we get there?
Is the question
Right, that's the question.
Is the question why do we ask Hashem to not give us these nisyonos if in that is where it's found the greatest alikus? Is that the question?
The question, l'chor, is really the opposite. If the bottom line is putting ourselves in those circumstances and environments is high risk. It's not a good idea, right? The halacha is that you're not allowed to put yourself in a situation that's going to put you at high risk of doing something wrong. You're not allowed to. It's clearly the right approach is to minimize risk. But these two concepts just don't seem to make sense. They seem to be just opposite mentalities or opposite priorities. On one hand, yes, go and get that tachton and convert it. On the other hand, stay away from things that are risky. Well, which one's the priority? Well, I mean, shlichus is...
Shlichus doesn't necessarily mean the lowest.
Right. Yes, it does. Sure.
Living
outside of the Jewish community in the middle
of the
right, shluchim, and you know what? The fact is that this is sort of... It's one of the challenges that shluchim often will struggle with on an ongoing basis, and will have to call the mashpia, the rav, very regularly sometimes with questions is, there's a situation, I can go get involved, I can bring some Chassidus, I can bring some mitzvahs, I can bring some Torah, some Yiddishkeit. Do I go there or not? And it's not always a simple answer.
I know somebody told me that her father goes into Masera downtown to the clubs and
You know what?
It sounds screwed. It's not a place to bring care.
No, he goes inside.
It might still help.
It's well interesting.
I am questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest dichotomy.
So,
She was so proud.
look, you know what? Maybe he's a person who's just that solid. Good for him. That's something to be proud of. Okay, anyways. So if it's the truth and it's the correct approach to try to minimize risk and stay away from risk, how is it that Hashem expects and wants us to go and be mavar the matavatan in tachlis? How does this work? They're diametrically opposite priorities, and they both seem to be in place at the same time. Ubifrant, now the Rebbe is going to take it further. So Zohar says, Hashem says to Pari, to Moshe Rabbeinu, Bay el Pari, come to Pari. What do you mean, come to Pari? It should say, Lech el Pari, go to Pari. Hashem is talking to Moshe, having a dialogue. Hashem wants Moshe to go to Pari, so what should he say? He should say, go to Pari. Why does he say, come to Pari? It doesn't seem to be the correct choice of words. So, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Maksiv, boy el Pari, why does it say, come to Pari? Lech el Pari, mi should have said, go to Pari. My boy, why does it say, come? Elo da'ayale kuchabricha l'Moshe Idrin lifnim idrin. Dahainu chadarim lifnim chadarim b'madregas chetzonim. Hashem took Moshe Rabbeinu and took him deep, 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 chambers within chambers, deep, deep inside klippa, inside negativity and chetzonim. Moshe, to go address Pari, we're talking now Baruchnius, the klippa of Pari. And Moshe was terrified. Moshe was afraid. V'loi karev, and he wasn't going any further. Hashem's taking him in deep, deep, deep into this negativity and klippa and chitzonim, and he's like, okay, now go and be mavara Pari. And Moshe says, I'm not going there. Like that's way too negative. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Moshe was scared. So it says, Moshe was scared. Dechilo, fear. Since when Hashem saw that Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid, Amar Kuchabricho, what did Hashem respond? Did Hashem say, you know what, Moshe Rabbeinu, get over yourself and go? Muster up some courage? No. What was Hashem's response to that? Amar Kuchabricho, Hinini alecha Pari melech Mitzrayim. Hashem says, you know what, Pari, I'm here. I am going to be on top of you. I'm going to be on your back. I'm going to take care of this. And Hashem waged war against Pari. No one else. Even Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid to engage the tachten she'en tachten lamata mimenu. So how are we supposed to be doing that if Moshe was even afraid? And not only was Moshe afraid, Hashem acknowledged the validity of that fear and said, you know what, Moshe Rabbeinu, you're right. Don't go there. I'll take care of it because it's too much for you. But we are supposed to. But this is the whole point, to be mavar tachten she'en tachten lamata mimenu. First of all, we say Al Tivyenu Lo Yidem Nisayon. Hashem wants us to take an approach of minimizing risk. Moshe Rabbeinu, of all people, was even scared, and Hashem agreed with him. So how does this work? So how are we supposed to be mavar the Tachen Shein Tachen Lamata Mimenu if it's something that Moshe Rabbeinu was correctly afraid to engage with, and Hashem said, "You're right, I'll do it." So are we supposed to, or are we not supposed to? What's it going to be? You can't eat your cake and have it. So v'nimtza, what we see here in this story in the Zohar is Moshe Rabbeinu hisyara lava b'lisasik b'bira mata afil la'achrei amir satziva b'yal pari. Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid to engage this lowest of the low, even after Hashem commanded him and said, oh, so just by the way, just to tie that in back to the question, how does that answer? Zohar, the Rabbi Shimon asked, why does it say b'yal pari? You should say lechel pari. Hashem was going with Moshe, and Hashem said, come, let's go. I'm taking you all the way in, all the way down into the pits of negativity and of klippa. So Hashem said, boy, I'm bringing you in. Hashem was there by his side. So that when Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, I'm not going there, Hashem was like, right, I got it. I'll take care of it. So first of all, Moshe, even after Hashem told him, Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, I'm not doing it. Like, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say no to Hashem all that many times. And when he said no, Hashem agreed and said, you know what, you're right, I'm going to take care of this myself. Or Baba Atzmai. And Hashem said, I am on your back, Pare. I'm going to take care of this, not Moshe. So on one hand, we're saying, yes, the mata is too much. Even it was too much for Moshe. Moshe was scared and Hashem agreed with him. But then on the other hand, we're saying that it's important that Torah Shabbat Peh should engage in and describe all the details and nitty gritty of the mata. Why? Why? Because Hashem wanted to bring that into existence so that we should be able to be Mavaret. What do you mean we should be able to be Mavaret the mata? Even Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid, and Hashem agreed he shouldn't go there because it's too much. So, how is it, I actually just wrote this last night in a comment on LinkedIn. Two things can be true at the same time, right? A lot of times people confuse things that are opposite in direction or have opposing priorities. Say, well, what about this? And how can you have this and you can have that? And sometimes you just need to clarify that although these two things may have opposing priorities or seem to be in conflict, they're not actually mutually exclusive and they can both be true at the same time. But these two things don't seem to be able to work at the same time, which is that Hashem does want us to be Mavara the mata, which is the whole reason that the mata exists, which is why Torah Shabbat Peh gets into it in detail, because Hashem wants it to exist and needs it to exist. So that's why Torah discusses it, so that it could be created and brought into being from within the Torah. Because why? So that we could be Mavaret. So on one hand, we're saying Hashem wants us to be Mavar the mata. On the other hand, when Hashem brought Moshe Rabbeinu and said, go be Mavar the mata, what did Moshe Rabbeinu say? He said, no, I'm too scared. And Hashem said, you know what? You're right. You shouldn't go there. I'll go there. So are we supposed to be Mavar the mata, or are we not supposed to be Mavar the mata? It doesn't seem like they can both be true at the same time.
Maybe being Mavar the mata is by avoiding it. Isn't that?
By not engaging.
Like, isn't there some things that the whole way we elevate it, like pig, let's say, you elevate it by not eating it, like.
Right. So in general, that is generally the answer. But the Rebbe is going to take it a whole level deeper, and this, sort of perhaps that's why the Rebbe brought in this interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov in the pasuk Sur Me'Rava Aseh Tov, to say they're not two different things. It's not just two different things. Yes, the pshat is Sur Me'Ra, you do what you have to do as far as the bad is concerned by staying away from it, and then engage in positivity. But the Baal Shem Tov, that can't work. Can't be enough based on what the Baal Shem Tov says. Because the Baal Shem Tov says an additional meaning of this pasuk is Sur Me'Ra, protect yourself from the negativity, make sure that it is not going to affect you. Va'aseh Tov, and once you've got that under control, Aseh Tov, convert it into good. But Moshe was scared to turn the bad into good. He was scared to engage with it. And Hashem agreed and said, you're right, don't, I will. So how does the pasuk say, Aseh Tov, go turn the bad into good?
Well, did Moshe end up going with Hashem in this?
No, Moshe stayed back. He went with Hashem most of the way, and when it came time to go all the way into Paro, Moshe was like, no, that's too much, I'm scared. And Hashem said, you know what, you're right, I'll go. So we're saying simultaneously that we shouldn't engage with the mata. Even Moshe Rabbeinu shouldn't engage with it. And then we're saying we should. Because Sur Me'Ra va'aseh Tov, and Aseh Tov includes mata, because that's the whole point of it existing.
But isn't there a way to make the Sur Me'Ra va'aseh Tov? Is there a way to do it without engaging in it? Not necessarily is the avoiding the Aseh Me'Ra, but there's other ways to do it.
Okay, good. So you're thinking, right, problem solving. And that is more or less what the solution is going to be. When you say a way, kind of, depending on what you mean by that, what do you mean by elevating it without engaging? Okay, whatever. I mean, it's you're on point. You've got the general idea of the solution, like you've got the first step towards the solution that the Rebbe is going to discuss. Okay, so